thank you for everything that's happened so far. I hope that I can continue the conversations that have been taking place, some really interesting and inspiring things that I've heard. And yes, so from my perspective, we know that we live in times of super complexity, and that's because of all these different multiple understandings of what it means to be human in a more than human world, and that actually cross-referencing these different ideas is unsettling. But we need to be unsettled because we need to be able to recognise an understanding of thriving that goes way beyond Western, extractivist, consumerist, technocentric lenses that are reductionist. We need to look at what it means to think about our interdependence. The discussions around DAO just a few minutes ago were really interesting in that respect. So for me, my background is as a fashion designer. I look back at the idea of what fashion means, from facere, to make together, to create meaning and benefit to all involved. So I explored that first of all as a designer, and then set up Centre for Sustainable Fashion. I'm not sure if everybody can hear me still. I'm going to continue because I'm not sure whether who can hear me and who can't. So I'm going to continue and hope for the best. So our work really looks at this idea of crisis across the three ecologies that Guattari speaks of. So how do we know how to live well together as humans? What is the lens in which we can think of the connection between nature, society, and ourselves? And that means, as we've heard a lot already, that we have to invert the thumping $3 trillion economic heart of the fashion system to be able to focus on this dynamic between economy, ecology, society and culture. And we do that through a framework that we developed a few years ago that we found has really worked well, whether we're working with learners in undergraduate or masters, whether we're working open source with learners across the world in different industries at different levels of work, or whether it is through our research. And this idea of being able to look at a new measure for prosperity is a real focus that I want to come back to and give some examples of how we're doing that. So this way of working means that we have to actually explore ourselves first. And so really a lot of what we focus on is this idea of the capabilities and agency that we need all of us to have as designers, but thinking about all of us, whether we're working as livelihoods in the industry, whether we're thinking about ourselves as citizens who wear clothes. So what that means actually is exploring the fourth dimension of sustainability that doesn't get, in fact, it was only actually recognised in 2012 in UN documents and isn't part of the Sustainable Development Goals, and that is of culture. And we've heard a little bit about that earlier on, but I want to come back to this idea of culture and mindsets as our ability to really be able to imagine beyond where we are and to be able to create the capabilities for thriving in the world together. So culture is a highly contested issue because its interpretation is actually beyond the verbal. It's deeply held. It's something that actually is part of all different customs and ways of being, which means that we can draw on a much wider range of knowledges than is currently looked at in academia and also in industry. So this idea of restorative care and in our practice is something that is around culture for us as at the heart of it. And something else that, again, I think we have to all support each other on is that it's a really difficult journey, and it's one that we have to go through all sorts of different phases. So this is a resilience loop that demonstrates how you might start at the right-hand side in an idea of crisis, you might build new ideas, you create ways in which those ideas can be amplified, but then you have to be really careful, going back to the idea that was talked about earlier on about integrity, that those ideas do not get commodified. They don't become the status quo. They don't then make us realise or make us think that we've moved on when really we haven't. So the way that we map the change that we make in ourselves and through each of our projects is through these ideas of scales of transformation. And these scales, we need to operate at each of those levels simultaneously. Raising awareness, being activists, looking at how you create change does create change in itself, but it doesn't create change across the system. We like to think about the ideation phase as the messy middle, something that invites everybody in, creating a safe space, which you can do as being part of a university that works with learners, that works with businesses, large and small, and also explores the territory of the discipline. Creating a safe space where we can ask the questions around what it means to live differently, but without negating any of the ideas that we bring forward. So this messy middle is the third way, is something that we really get excited about working in, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But ultimately, unless we're working towards a shift in consciousness, and we're really careful to check that doesn't become a commoditization of what came before. This is a critical point at which I think all of these discussions and conversations are coming to. And I probably don't need to tell anybody in the room or online here that because fashion is such a powerful force, both in terms of livelihoods, in terms of a discipline, in terms of what it changes in society, and also as this huge sector that involves so many people working at levels from micro to macro, it is a great opportunity and challenge to be able to change beyond fashion through changing fashion, which is why I do get invited onto things like the United Nations work around achieving the ambitions of net zero, because fashion is such a great mediator for change beyond itself as well as within itself. So the example that I want to give is around a project that we've been working on for over 3 years now, which is called Fostering Sustainable Practices. We've done a longitudinal study by working with about 40 designers in the UK to explore what it actually looks like to think about prosperity in cultural, economic, social, and environmental terms. We've created a kind of guidebook that gives some of the overviews of how that is manifest, how the tensions connect between those different things, and case studies of some of the people involved. So please do check our website where we've got a project page for fostering sustainable prosperity and a kind of hub page where there's lots of resources there. So I know I've got only a short amount of time now, so I'm really going to just dip into some sections of the guidebook to talk about how we manifest this connection and how the designers themselves start to see how their own practice really plays out. So the starting point for us for this work was not the product, but actually to look at values, the values that designers have, to explore what those values are and how they then get translated into visions. I heard earlier on people talking about the mood board. For us, it's actually a really critical starting point, because unless you talk about and think about your values translated into a vision through the concept of your collections, if you think about it later on, it's very difficult to match them up. So thinking about the values, the visions, and then how they become the capabilities, and how over a lifetime you carry on learning and honing those capabilities, and thinking about how you can do that through co-inquiry with others. The breakdown of the idea of the designer as a hierarchy is still quite nascent, but we're seeing lots of examples of this kind of humility of the designer, understanding that they can respect themselves and their own integrity and respect others, and really be clear about the different things that people bring to a situation, and that it is the collective that creates the collection. So values, vision, capabilities, and then practices. What do those practices actually look like tangibly? And again, earlier on today, we've seen things around concepts, and we've also seen things around really tangible practice, which is absolutely essential. So being able to look at what that means and what that looks like, but not just in terms that have been used in the past around measuring things. We need new kinds of measures and new metrics. So there's a lot of text on here that I'm sure people won't be able to read, actually. So I will just précis by saying that we looked at this idea of a living way of being that connects our personal, cultural, societal, and environmental thriving through our own practices, and what that actually looks like in products, services, and systems. So we did start by looking at culture, because we think that actually underpins change very dramatically. We looked at how that actually plays out in looking at social prosperity and what our own practices can actually mean from an organisational structural perspective as well. Actually, the area of environmental sustainability was something that was quite tricky for a lot of the small designers we work with. We've heard earlier on about the gaps in data. And so how can we look at what we can see directly and what we can trust, and then who we need to be able to work with so that we can create a sort of bond of trust across supply chains. I know I'm out of time, so I'm going to have to finish up here. Do check out what we've got on the website, because it'll give you a lot more information. And I just really want to finish by saying that, yeah, we do live in times where we need to unravel and then re-entangle ourselves, because this idea of interdependence is something that is a state of mind, it's a state of thinking, and it's a state of practice. And that actually this lens for seeing, knowing, doing, and learning to live together is one that gives me great hope. And it is the fundamental hope of our times, that we can learn to live well together in and through fashion. Thank you.